All right, let's cover some new, quote unquote, new news that just a few days ago, less than a week ago, um, the government announced a connection between Tylenol and autism and uh, said that taking Tylenol during pregnancy may be connected to autism rates and ADHD rates. And so this has been big time news in mainstream media. Um, for those of us who actually read research and stay up on things, we've been saying this for 20 years. So, it wasn't that exciting to me, other than the fact that they're finally admitting it. And so today I want to show you that this is not new at all. It's, again, decades old, but now that you're aware of it, um, we'll teach you why they should have been talking about this decades ago. And so, one reason why is because if this news was broadly known and, moms got mad enough, Big Pharma would lose a lot of money because Tylenol is a drug that is in every home in the US just about. And so rather than protect consumers, Tylenol's chosen to protect profits. And they've made that choice for decades. And we'll get there in a moment. But just so you can see, I've made videos on this that have been on my YouTube channel for a long time. You can see 5 years ago, I posted one on Tylenol toxicity. What are normal doses? Are you at risk? And in that video, I talk about its connection to autism and neurodevelopmental disorders. And 7 years ago, I made this one on Tylenol and how it can impact sex hormones and birth defects. So again, this is not new. Um, the statistics say that brand new research that will be published today oftentimes takes 17 years to make it into medical textbooks and mainstream media. And so this stuff is finally hitting consciousness to the masses. But again, it's unfortunately been around 20 years and that number hasn't improved significantly. So hopefully we can get new information out faster and more broadly, even if pharma loses money because of it. So why would they not want to lose money? Well, because they're at risk of losing a lot, and they have lost a lot already. And so you can see this article right here. This was in Forbes magazine in 1998. It was published. So again, this is almost 30 years old, and it's entitled J&J's Dirty Little Secret. So you can Google this today and pull it up and read the entire article. And I think you should. Again, look at that. Even Forbes is warning you. This article is more than 10 years old. Yeah, it's almost 30. Um, and this article's just the dirty little secret is they're documenting multiple people who have died or been maimed by taking Tylenol. And so, here's a little story of a 5-year-old girl who died within a week of taking Tylenol for a cold. And here's another person that had there's another person with liver failure and multiple deaths documented in the article. And the ironic thing is that the marketing slogan for Tylenol is nothing safer, but that is not true. And there's plenty of evidence debunking that marketing slogan. And so, yes, safe as it appears at appropriate doses, Tylenol can be very dangerous at doses not much higher than appropriate. And we'll dive into why that is today. But I just wanted to show you this and have you look this up if you're interested in this topic and read it because you probably have Tylenol in your medicine cabinet. And Tylenol is the number one recommended pain reliever for pregnant women. And that's not good if you want a happy, healthy baby without neurodevelopmental disorders, as we'll see. But also, there could be sexual and reproductive disorders caused by the Tylenol in the fetus, too. And we'll cover that. So let's keep going. The announcement coincides with publication of multiple studies recently this year on, again, the connection of Tylenol with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and with autism. and other neurodevelopmental disorders. So we're going to dive into these. But before we get into the new research, again, I want to reinforce the old research. So let's jump over to that first. All right, so here we are. And again, here's the full text of that J&J article from Forbes. And it's about 9 pages. You know, you can look it up on Google and just right click save as and save it if you want to. But give it a good read if you're someone that uses Tylenol a lot. But if we're looking at the scientific research, here's a paper from way back in 2012. Okay, and this is from Stephanie Seneff, who is an MIT PhD that is brilliant. She is a brilliant researcher, and she's published a lot on the importance of she's published a lot on autism and things like Tylenol exposure, aluminum, sulfate deficiencies, all kinds of things. She's got really great research. She's published on water, she's published on cholesterol, on statins. She is excellent. And so here's a paper she and her colleagues published, again, from MIT back in 2012, looking at um, autism risk. And the title of the paper is Empirical Data Confirm Autism Symptoms Related to Aluminum and Acetaminophen Exposure. So acetaminophen is Tylenol. Another name that it goes by is paracetamol, which we'll see here in a moment. That's what it's called in Europe oftentimes. So she connected way back in 2012 autism connections with aluminum from vaccines and Tylenol usage. And so if we look down here at the paper, she shows that her study results provide strong evidence supporting a link between autism and aluminum and vaccines. She is not a one-off wacky weirdo scientist either. The neurosurgeon Russell Blaylock has also published on aluminum and autism connection, and many other people have as well. So here, most of the paper is looking at the aluminum tie-in, but also if you read this down here, we can see she's saying we propose that children with autism diagnosis are especially vulnerable to toxic metals such as aluminum and mercury, and those are found in many vaccines. They're they're um, they're especially vulnerable due to insufficient serum sulfate and glutathione. A strong correlation between autism and the MMR vaccine is also observed, and this has been discovered by many people as well. And many parents will say their child developed autism signals after MMR vaccination, which is 3 vaccines in one. Okay, and so she said here the correlation between autism and MMR may be partially explained via increased sensitivity to Tylenol administered to control the fever. Okay, so what happens is kids go in for their vaccines, and the doctor says, you know, give the kid Tylenol to deal with the fever. Fever is a side effect of the vaccine, so give the kid Tylenol. The problem is that Tylenol causes deficiency of glutathione. And glutathione, as we've talked about many, many times on this channel, there's many videos on it. Please go check them out. But just as a review, glutathione is our body's master antioxidant. So to deal with toxins like heavy metals or to deal with infections or to have optimal liver detoxification pathways, optimal neurodevelopment and protection of the brain, we need glutathione. Well, if you're going to give a vaccine that's going to inflame the brain and contribute heavy metals to the brain, and then you give them Tylenol, which decreases the glutathione, or say the kid has had multiple fevers in life and you're giving your kid Tylenol because the doctor says give your Tylenol to break fever because you don't want the fever to melt his brain. Well, now that kid may have gone into the vaccine dose with low glutathione, and bam, perfect storm, and you have a neurodevelopmental disorder. So uh, that's one mechanism. As we'll talk about at length today, mom taking Tylenol during the pregnancy drives a significant increased risk for autism development, ADHD development, other neurodevelopmental disorders as well. So again, not new, way back 2012. Here's one from 2018. And again, the title of this paper is acetaminophen, Tylenol, paracetamol, whichever name you want to call it. The use of Tylenol modifies the sulfation of sex hormones. So I showed you that video I published 7 years ago on Tylenol use and sex hormone use. I'm covering this paper in that video. This is from 2018. We're in 2025 right now. So you can go watch that video. We'll hit the high points of the paper right here, which are significant. So if we zoom in here, you can see it says Tylenol is one of the most common medications used for management of pain in the world. Uh, there's concern about the possibility of adverse effects on reproductive health. We identified a distinct pattern of depletion of sulfated sex hormones with use of Tylenol across all populations, men, women, all ethnicities. Uh, Tylenol use phenocopied the effect of genetic variants in the SALT2A1 gene. So basically what that means is if someone has, so SALT genes help us metabolize our sex hormones, and so they help sulfate it. Well, if you use Tylenol, if you have a variant of that gene, you're not going to sulfate your sex hormone well. Well, using Tylenol create a similar effect to if you had a genetic variant in the gene, a similar inefficiency. So the effect of taking Tylenol on sulfated sex hormones was roughly equivalent to the effect of 35 years of aging. So we live in a society that is focused on anti-aging, on longevity, on looking young, and so many people will do anything to look younger, be younger, right? Well, what what can you do besides smoking or sleep deprivation? What's going to age you 35 years faster than those things? Nothing, right? The sleep deprivation, smoking it will age you very quickly. Well, third might be Tylenol based on this paper. So if you're taking Tylenol, this is equivalent to aging your sex hormone levels 35 years. No one wants to do that, whether you were just born or whether you're 20. 20-year-olds becoming a 55-year-old sex hormone wise, 40-year-old becoming a 75-year-old sex hormone wise. So you have to be careful with Tylenol. Tylenol has been on the market for over 50 years. It's found in over 200 different drugs on the market as an active ingredient. So we'll talk a little bit about how Tylenol during pregnancy damages the fetus's brain and can promote autism and or ADHD and others. Well, we're seeing it in kids of mothers who claim to have not taken any Tylenol during the pregnancy. And they're not lying. The problem is they've taken other medications, and there's over 200 medications on the market that have Tylenol as an active ingredient in there. So again, this is a much bigger problem than these studies are even able to follow. Intrauterine exposure to Tylenol causes disruption of hormone homeostasis and male urogenital malformation. So if you're taking Tylenol when you're pregnant and you have a little boy, it might lead to malformations of the genitalia at birth. Prenatal exposure to Tylenol alters the masculinization of the male brain and behavior in mice and reduces testosterone production by the human fetal testes. So again, if you're having a boy and you're taking Tylenol, it may be less of a boy due to Tylenol side effects and toxicity. So again, be careful. A couple other points here. Um, so they gave Tylenol to one, they took twins and they gave one twin Tylenol and they gave the other twin no Tylenol. And they said at any visit, the twin receiving the Tylenol had values of sex hormones statistically lower than those of their twin that was not receiving the drug. So doing it with twins, you would say, okay, if they're twins, genetically the same, right? We'd expect them to produce the same sex hormones, etc. The factor being measured is Tylenol use. The twin that used the Tylenol has less hormones than the twin not taking Tylenol. Big time. Okay, let's look here. I can skip that. All right, and then down here. If you take Tylenol, there's decreased pregnanediol disulfate levels in a manner that was roughly equivalent to 35 years of aging. Again, we don't want to age that quickly ever. Um, Individuals who took Tylenol had very low levels of neurosteroids such as pregnenolone sulfate and DHEA sulfate. So these neurosteroids, or you can think of them as neurohormones, okay? They help with happiness and all kinds of normal cognitive function. Tylenol decreases those. This mechanism could synergize with Tylenol's known mode of action in the central nervous system. Over half of women take Tylenol during pregnancy. There are epidemiological in vitro and animal data that raise questions about the effects of Tylenol on hormone homeostasis or hormone balance. It has been shown that DHEAS is an important carrier for steroids into the placenta. In addition to possible risks to the development of the genital tract, there are reports of potential side effects on neurocognitive and behavioral development. So again, there's autism, ADHD, and others. So this was a 2018 paper. Again, this isn't new. Let's look at the hot off the press papers. So this paper was published in Nature Mental Health 2025. Paper from collaboration from Rutgers, University of California, San Francisco, University of Tennessee, and Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Title: Association of Maternal Blood Markers of Prenatal Tylenol Exposure with Placental Gene Expression in Child ADHD. So they're looking at mom using Tylenol while she's pregnant, and does ADHD occur in the child, in the offspring? Despite evidence linking prenatal Tylenol exposure and adverse neurodevelopment in humans and animals, over half of pregnant women in most populations use Tylenol. We estimated associations between mom's blood markers of Tylenol exposure and child ADHD in 307 African American mother-child pairs. Okay, so they followed 307 African American moms and obviously the child because the mom was pregnant. Okay. Overall, detection of Tylenol in the second trimester was associated with higher odds for child ADHD diagnosis by over 3 times. So if you're taking Tylenol during your pregnancy, especially in the second trimester and third too, second and third seem to be where it was most dangerous. The next study will show us second and third. Both studies say second. So, second seems to be a really key time to minimize Tylenol exposure while you're pregnant. So if you're taking Tylenol during the second trimester, male and female births had a 3-time increased risk of ADHD. If it was females and girls only, that risk is 5 times. Or excuse me, 5% higher odds, excuse me. 3x higher odds for boys and girls, 5% with women. Okay. In both sexes, there's a downregulation of oxidative phosphorylation, which is how our bodies make energy. Okay. If you don't make energy well, how well is your brain going to function? How well is your body going to function? So Tylenol use during pregnancy, not great. An estimated 41 to 70% of pregnant women report taking Tylenol in America, European, and Asian populations. Accumulating evidence from human and animal studies show links between Tylenol exposure and adverse reproductive and neurodevelopmental outcomes in the baby. Observational studies have shown associations of prenatal exposure with higher risks of ADHD and autism. Oxidative stress from glutathione depletion is the cause of Tylenol-induced liver failure and liver toxicity. Look at this. Because hundreds of medications contain Tylenol, individuals may unknowingly inject it. For instance, one study found Tylenol analytes in the blood from 20% of women who reported no intake. So again, these women said, no, I didn't take Tylenol, but they took some other drug, right? And 20% of those women tested positive for Tylenol. So there's many other drugs with Tylenol in it. Follow-up investigation found that close to 18% reported no intake, took pain or cold medications that may contain it. So again, if you're not taking Tylenol directly, check your pain medications, check your cold medications, because many of them do contain it. Neurotoxicity of prenatal Tylenol exposure could be mediated via perturbations to the placenta, which regulates nutrient waste and gas exchange between the mother and fetus, providing a functional link between the maternal environment and fetal programming. So again, how might mom swallowing Tylenol damage the baby? Well, mom's blood gets the baby via the placenta, and so we need to be careful what moms need to be careful what they're putting in there. In this pregnancy cohort sample of 307 mother-child pairs of Black African American ethnicity from the urban South, prenatal Tylenol exposure was associated with ADHD outcomes and perturbed placenta gene pathways. Detection of Tylenol analytes in the second trimester blood was associated with higher odds for child ADHD diagnosis and prescriptions of ADHD medications. So again, second trimester was the most important one. The next study also says the third trimester is, and again, up to 3 times increased odds of being diagnosed. These findings support well-known associations of prenatal Tylenol and adverse child neurodevelopment. So let us go to the final study here, which was published from Harvard in Environmental Health. All right, so you can see here, the title is Evaluation of the Evidence on Tylenol Use and Neurodevelopmental Disorders. Tylenol is the most commonly used over-the-counter pain and fever medication taken during pregnancy, with over 50% of pregnant women using it worldwide. Holy cow. Half the planet, half the pregnant women on the planet use Tylenol while pregnant. Numerous well-designed studies have indicated that pregnant mothers exposed to Tylenol have children diagnosed with neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism and ADHD, at higher rates than children of pregnant mothers who are not exposed to Tylenol. Overall, the majority of the studies report positive associations of Tylenol use in pregnancy with ADHD, autism, and neurodevelopmental disorder in the offspring. Our analysis supports evidence consistent with an association between Tylenol exposure during pregnancy and increased incidence of neurodevelopmental disorder. Appropriate and immediate steps should be taken to advise pregnant women to limit Tylenol consumption to protect their offspring's neurodevelopment. This is Harvard. This is Harvard. Look, harvard.edu. You want to reach out to the author, you email at her Harvard address. So Harvard's saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be taking so much Tylenol. Pregnancy is a critical period of embryonic and fetal development, and there are stages, times of rapid and sequential physiological and developmental changes. The developing brain is especially vulnerable to environmental exposures because of incomplete development of the blood-brain barrier and the ongoing growth, differentiation, and pruning of neurons throughout early childhood. The complex and tightly regulated nature of brain development in utero means that even minor or temporary disruptions to the process can have significant and long-lasting effects on the developing brain. Thus, early exposures to chemicals, toxins, drugs, and other exogenous agents can alter normal neurodevelopment and have long-lasting effects, including neurodevelopmental disorders. So again, pregnancy, mom must be careful what she's taking in. Neurodevelopmental disorders describe a category of conditions that result from deviations in normal brain development, resulting in a wide variety of symptoms that may include difficulties in areas such as learning, social and motor skills, attention, cognition, emotions, and behavior. These include autism and ADHD. Different neurodevelopmental disorders have often shared overlapping symptoms, as well as shared biological pathways or causes, including toxic exposures during critical developmental windows, like in utero, like pregnancy. Tylenol, also known as acetaminophen, is currently considered the only pain and fever reducer indicated for use during pregnancy because of the risks of miscarriage or birth defects associated with other pain relievers like NSAIDs. In fact, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecology have reassured patients that Tylenol is safe to take during pregnancy. I wonder where most of their funding comes from. Probably pharma. Thus, Tylenol has become the first-line medication for fever and pain during pregnancy. It's been estimated that greater than 60% of women use Tylenol during pregnancy for headaches and other pain or fever, with 20% of pregnant women using it for more than 20 days. Okay, so remember, it's not that if you take Tylenol one time in your pregnancy, your child will have autism. Okay, the dose equals the toxin. Okay, so appropriate use, you might be okay, but just slightly more than appropriate use or slight inappropriate use increases risk. Taking it daily, not a good thing. Okay, analyze the available in this study. They analyze the available literature to comprehensively assess the influence of Tylenol use on the developing brain. So what they find? This is 42-page paper. You can read it. You can search the title and download it, read the whole thing. If we jump down, um, basically they're saying we found the link as well. Okay. Most results are consistent across different time periods, data sets, and patient populations. When a mother takes Tylenol while pregnant, the odds of her child having a neurodevelopmental disorder like ADHD or autism increased. And these associations were statistically significant. There were stronger associations with exposure in the second and third trimesters. So there it is again. Here's another paper saying second trimester and third in this one. Okay. Given Tylenol's role as a first-line pain reliever and fever reducer during pregnancy, due to the known harms of NSAIDs, our findings must be contextualized clinically. NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, may pose cancer risks, particularly in the third trimester. So you don't want to do that, right? So if NSAIDs are causing potential cancer risk and Tylenol is causing potential autism risk, well, what the heck do we do? There's no clear pharmacological alternative, no drug option. And for fever management, how about non-drug options like physical cooling, ice pack? How about medical consultation? How about herbs? How about letting the fever go? There's research saying, hey, fever is an evolutionarily conserved mechanism. Perhaps we don't need to break fever. Perhaps it's there for a reason, like helping us beat the infection. These authors say that they advocate for cautious, time-limited Tylenol use under medical guidance, highlighting the need for research into safer alternatives and updated guidelines. So again, should you never take it? Not necessarily. There's a time and place, but it shouldn't be candy. It shouldn't be every day. It shouldn't be a habit. Okay. And, you know, just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean you need a drug. Sometimes it's okay to push through some discomfort. The observed association between prenatal Tylenol use and neurodevelopmental disorders may be hypothesized to follow a two-hit developmental model, where Tylenol use is the first insult during the vulnerable brain window, and then concurrent stressors like mom having a fever or infection or oxidative stress serve as the second hit. So again, you could say, well, this two-hit model um, has been proposed for autism and other issues like they are here. And the two hits in this paper, the first hit would be using Tylenol. The second hit might be injury, infection, trauma, autoimmunity. Like you could say, well, why did that mom take Tylenol and her baby came out fine, and that mom took it and her baby has autism? Well, again, the first hit was Tylenol. If there was no other toxic exposure, anything she had to deal with, maybe that's enough for baby to come out fine. But this other mom had Tylenol and then got, maybe lost a loved one or lost a job or lost a dog or got divorced or, you know, who knows? Got an infection, got in a car accident. There's some other input that took the stress level over the top and led to impact on brain development. This looks like a lot, but this is important here. Okay. During prenatal development, the endocrine system, so there's your hormonal system, the endocrine system plays a crucial role in brain development as it regulates the production and activity of hormones that are essential for healthy brain development. Disruptions in the endocrine system, such as exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals, what are those? BPA in our plastics, hidden estrogens everywhere, glyphosate or Roundup sprayed on every farm in the world, Tylenol, lots of things, right? So exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals can interfere with the activity of these hormones and potentially lead to permanent structural and functional alterations in the developing brain. Tylenol is an endocrine disruptor. Tylenol is an endocrine disruptor that directly perturbs hormone-dependent processes, that affects neurodevelopment and reproductive disorders, and, and affects steroid hormone production, as we saw in the previous paper, and might alter the steroid hormones in the placenta and induce placental damage. So, many studies show that Tylenol directly perturbs hormone-dependent processes that are implicated in the development of neurodevelopmental disorders. Further, during prenatal development, the epigenome undergoes dynamic changes that regulate gene expression, contributing to brain development. So that's a mouthful, but we've talked on this channel many times about epigenetics. So genetics are the genes, the hand of cards that you were dealt. Are the environmental factors that regulate the expression of those genes, right? Many men and women have the BRCA1 gene or the breast cancer gene in the United States, but many of them will never develop breast cancer. So if breast cancer were genetic, that would mean everyone with that gene develops breast cancer. That's not what we see. Some people with that gene develop breast cancer. The ones where that gene is expressed, well, what determines if that gene is expressed? Epigenetics, control from above the gene. So lifestyle, environment, exposures. Same thing. This is saying that the epigenetic input during growth in utero or in the pregnant mommy, one of the epigenetic inputs is Tylenol exposure, and that changes genetic expression in brain development and contributes to ADHD, autism, and others. Well, how? Well, one pathway it affects is DNA methylation. For those of you out there that read health blogs a lot, you've heard of the MTHFR gene, the methylation pathway. Methylation is how the body turns genes on and off. So if prenatal Tylenol use is changing DNA methylation in the fetus, then that can lead to neurodevelopmental disorders. So I'll save you the pain of reading the rest of that paragraph. Conclusions. Our analysis demonstrated evidence consistent with an association between exposure to Tylenol during pregnancy and offspring with neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism and ADHD. A causal relationship is plausible because of the consistency of the results and appropriate control for bias in the large majority of epidemiological studies, as well as Tylenol's biological effects on the developing fetus in experimental studies. Further, a potential causal relationship is consistent with temporal trends. In other words, Tylenol has become the recommended pain reliever for pregnant mothers, and the rates of ADHD and autism have increased over 20x over the past decades. So as Tylenol adoption has been picked up by half the pregnant women on the planet, we've also seen an increase in ADHD and autism. So those are points that support causality. While this association warrants caution, untreated maternal fever and pain pose risks such as neural tube defects and preterm birth, necessitating a balanced approach. So again, there's a time and place. We don't want a fever to get way out of hand in mom because that could impact baby as well. The stress of really bad pain could impact the baby as well. So there is a time and place for medication, but again, caution is the name of the game. Okay, we don't want to swallow them like people swallow Tums or people swallow candy. The authors recommend, Harvard recommends judicious Tylenol use, lowest effective dose possible, shortest duration possible, under medical guidance, tailored to a benefit risk assessment rather than broad limitation or broad acceptance, right? So again, individualized and specific to the mom and the trimester she's in and the symptoms she's dealing with and the rest of her case. So if you're out there and you heard the news this week of the link of the admission of the link by the government of Tylenol with neurodevelopmental disorders, then hooray. I celebrate with you that they're finally admitting it and talking about it. But again, recognize that this is not new news. This is not new information. It's been in the research for 30 years or more. And J&J has paid out a lot of money to people who have been maimed or killed by the seemingly innocuous Tylenol. And so if you're out there and you're using it, make sure that you're using it appropriately. And if you're pregnant, do your best to minimize its use, especially in the second trimester. So let's open that up for questions, comments.
I was thinking about this because trying to think about, what's the alternative, right? And
Mhm.
there are a lot of alternatives that we can use and try to make our pain go away and all of that. But recently it's funny because they have like massage and acupuncture and all of that and white willow bark, and there are options out there, of course. And then it made me think like about this recent study that I had in class when they were doing the study on giving soldiers morphine, and they gave some soldiers a placebo of morphine. It wasn't morphine, but they
Yep.
had pain reduction and they thought they had gotten morphine. And I just
Yep.
want to, like it's just a very powerful thing just to even when we keep getting all of these news articles about NSAIDs are terrible, and we've already known this for a long time, just that we can't overlook the power of our mind. And I know that sometimes it's easier said than done, but it is powerful, and that there are options out there for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I've said it before, but placebo is the most successfully studied drug of all time. Placebo, across like all studies, all interventions, I think placebo usually has like a 33 to 35% group that is improved. So, basically one in three will improve if you just give them an inert pill and tell them that it's Tylenol.
Right.
So, yeah, your point is well taken. There's 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 chiropractor, there's massage, there's nutrition, there's hydration, there's sleep, there's posture, there's grounding. There's so many things that I mean, headaches. Again, Tylenol for a headache isn't doing anything to deal with the cause of the headache, right?
No.
It's just blunting the symptoms. So
Mhm.
our bias is, well, let's understand what's driving the headache, and if we correct that, not only is the headache going, but you're healthier overall, and then your baby's healthier, developing more healthily overall.
Right.
So all these things, this is cool for us because it looks like the trend is moving us in a way that is more aware, that a way we've all wanted it to be for a while, so that's great.
Hmm.
And hopefully next would be not just pointing out, hey, there's the connection here, but okay, well then what do we do? How should we even, what lens should we view the world through in terms of health, right? Instead of like,
Right.
how do I duct tape over the check engine light? It's like, well, how do I keep this from happening at all? You know,
Yeah. I just think if we'd have been schooled a little bit differently, we would I mean, it's just so easy to pop a pill.
a lot differently.
It
Yeah.
frustrates me. It's
Yeah.
because,
Well, it's
it's like I
funny.
want to
I
keep
was,
functioning.
yeah, yeah, I was listening to Jordan Peterson conversation recently. He was talking about school systems, not health necessarily, but it's apt here. As he said, uh, public schools are less about education and more about child warehousing.
Hmm.
It's like, just how do we put these kids somewhere and distract them for 18 years real quick? Um, and so again, while you've got them there, instead of teaching them all these things that aren't useful in life at all, it's like, why don't we teach them how to think and approach health and all that? But again, we're talking to the choir, and we understand, the textbooks are paid for by pharmaceutical companies and all this stuff. So
Right.
obviously their education, quote unquote, is what they're going to get. So,
Yeah.
but we can speak to the ones who want to hear it. So, when you have a pregnant friend or someone who's considering getting pregnant, maybe just let them know, hey, it's pregnancy. There might be some changes. You might have a random headache, and whatever. There's symptoms that are going to come, but check this stuff out. You might not want to use much Tylenol while you're pregnant. Seek other options.